Hello friends, and welcome to an outdoor edition of the Gesundheit Kitchen. I love it when we do these sort of on locations things, but today wanted to step out of the kitchen and talk about some of the frequently asked questions that people ask me either in person or by email, or after watching a video they might ask specific questions. So I thought I'd take an opportunity kind of just to have a conversation about some of those questions. So post-surgery, the sort of physical layout is completely different, and depending on your particular situation, there's a whole spectrum of what they may or may not have done or how they've rearranged the plumbing. So I will preface it by saying it's always a great idea to have a conversation with your nutritionist and your surgeon if you are having any structural physical problems with certain foods, just to make sure that there's no blockage, there's not a constriction there that's causing those issues. So right off the bat, people tend to ask, how many calories should I be shooting for every day? So if I were to pick a number, what's that goal am I shooting for? Again, this is so specific to your individual machine. I often tell people that think of us all as cars, and you might be a Honda, I might be a Range Rover. We're all geared and sort of tuned a little differently. So when we talk about calories, remember that calories are just a number based on when you burn that food, how much heat it gives off, right? So it's kind of an arbitrary number when it comes to nutrition. So typically those high calorie foods are going to be things that are high in fat, that are high in sugars, that aren't necessarily equivalent to high nutrition. So it's not just about reaching some number, be it 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, whatever your desired calorie rate is. You also have to factor in protein and fiber. We're always pushing the fiber. So really, don't think of it so much about this total number, but the quality of calories that you're getting. And again, have that conversation with your nutritionist, because it can be a very individual and specific target. It might include them doing a resting metabolic rate, where they put you inside this sort of a tent where they're measuring your breath to see what your sort of resting needs are. And then from there, they'll calculate your specific calorie needs based on your situation. So have that conversation. The other question sounds kind of frivolous, but who doesn't love popcorn? And I think because popcorn is crunchy and it's kind of structurally complex, people worry about popcorn getting stuck. Can I have popcorn? You'd be surprised how many people ask that question. And I am a huge fan of popcorn, love it. And I jokingly say that I have an extra stomach, which would mean one stomach. I have an extra stomach for popcorn, in that's a food that I tend to be able to eat quite a bit of. What I would caution you against is the kernels, the unpopped kernels or the half-popped kernels. Those can be a cause of diverticulitis, where those unpopped kernels can get stuck in your plumbing. So try to get just the fully popped fluffy parts. The sort of downside with popcorn is you're going to feel like you're eating a lot, but nutritionally it's pretty void, right? There's not a lot going on nutritionally in popcorn. You're going to get that sensation of the salty and the crunchy, and I love all of that. But I would recommend, rather than focusing on popcorn, try to look for slightly more nutritious alternates, like a chickpea-based chip or lentil flour chips that have that crunch, they have that salt. And then if you really want to be mindful to avoid those the pitfalls of having those kernels, look at rice cakes, or even there's a brand called Popcorners. It's a pressed popcorn product where they've mechanically sorted through and gotten rid of all of those rock hard little kernels, which might cause a problem in the future. So I'm not against popcorn, just be mindful and realize that there's probably a more nutritious, healthier snack that will be more bang for your buck. All of the carnivores out there, or the omnivores at least, get a little, I don't want to say upset, but they're always wondering why all of the Gesundheit Kitchen episodes tend to be vegetarian. And it's not that I'm shunning meat, but just know that meat is high in protein, but it's a very complex matrix. And so it can be difficult to swallow, especially if you're not chewing thoroughly and properly. It can sometimes get hung in the esophagus. But also it can sit in your gut kind of like a rock. It's super hard, it's super dense. So if you are a steak person, a meat and potatoes person, I am not saying you have to avoid that. I might suggest kind of keeping it as a special occasion food. Smaller quantities, so go for like a petite filet Make sure you have plenty of lubrication as you eat it. So a sauce or some good olive oil to make sure that it, just mechanically it goes down easier. And know again that even though you might have 22, 24 grams of protein on paper, the reality of you getting that much protein out of it, especially if you don't have a stomach, you have no stomach acid to break that down into a format that your body can readily assimilate. So if you love meat, I'm not saying avoid it. You just might want to go for either ground beef, or again, make sure that you're eating smaller portions, but make sure it's well oiled, well sauced, well lubricated to make sure that things don't get hung up. So if you love your steak, have your steak just maybe as a special occasion. So directly after having a gastrectomy, bubbles can be something you crave, but a little bit technically difficult. So I get asked about carbonated beverages, sometimes beer, which is my favorite of the carbonated beverages. And I will say that for almost a year post-gastrectomy, I couldn't handle any carbonation. If I was served a carbonated beverage, I would let it sit for a time and let some of the carbonation dissipate, so it's not so aggressively bubbly. Now, if you like mineral water, you can actually buy different sort of levels. It'll say low carbonation, mid carbonation, or high carbonation. And so go for those lower carbonated beverages. And then the other thing to realize that a lot of carbonated beverages are high in sugar. The ones like the colas, the lemon limes, those things, you have these fond memories, they're a comfort food, but it's not just the carbonation, it's those empty calories that sometimes can kind of push you over the edge, cause latent dumping syndrome, can cause some blood sugar issues. So it's not that you can't have carbonated beverages, just be mindful, take it easy. With anything, gradually work your way into those bubbly beverages. The other one I get asked a lot about is chicken. So chicken is notorious for sometimes getting stuck, like physically lodged in as you're swallowing it. And you'll find that it's the breast meat chicken, which just by definition, the grain of the meat is a very long grain, but continuous fibers. So those, as you're swallowing, can get stuck. So if you're a white meat chicken person, if that's your preference, just make sure you cut it up, like manually cut it up, either before or after you cook it, so that as you're chewing it, you're not going to have those long fibers getting stuck. The dark meat is, just by definition, it has more inherent fat in the meat, and fat is where the flavor is. So I personally like the chicken thighs, chicken legs, chicken wings. There's more fat in there, makes it easier to swallow, but they're also a shorter grain. It's always a good idea with any kind of a meat. It's always a good idea to physically cut it up smaller if you've had a partial or total gastrectomy. But given one over the other, the dark meat chicken is typically a little easier to swallow, and it also usually is a little higher nutritionally as far as protein and how easily you can absorb that. So again, you don't have to avoid chicken, just do your best to mechanically break it down into smaller portions before you swallow. I love it when folks either stop me at the grocery store or they send an email. I meet a lot of patients just out and about in my travels. I love having a conversation about what sort of tips and tricks work well for you. Please send in your questions. If you have questions, I guarantee you, if you have a question to somebody else who has that same exact question, and I don't know what you don't know. So always love the feedback. Take care of yourself. Be mindful of how you're fueling this machine. And together we will get through this one day at a time, one bite at a time. Take care.